Now, many people are so astonished when they start to wake up, they look into a spiritual means to escape it. In fact, they go spiritual shopping, like religious shopping. And most folk pick something in the New Age because they feel that the old religions don't guarantee them enough security. And so the New Age is something where there's no real rules, and it promises you personal power and all of this kind of stuff. And that's how they hope to get through stuff which they don't understand, this big New World Order and its rapidity of changing. But they hope to personally come through it somehow. And what it teaches them is how to deny all the negatives and not even look at the negatives, and teach them just to be happy. Now, Huxley would have been awfully happy with that himself, because he said that the main reason that people should be conditioned by those who knew how to do it is simply to put them into a state of happiness, because most people were always unhappy. He didn't mention the reason that they're always unhappy is because we're always going through either wars or economic wars or economic depressions and so on, or unemployment or whatever, because the big boys club of which he was a member made all those things happen. So naturally you're pretty unhappy. So the whole key is to make you simply happy. And if you're happy regardless of what's happening, you're basically a conditioned fool. Because a natural creature would not be happy if its environment was threatened. I'm talking about its personal home, for instance, or the land that it walks on, or even its own personal security. It would not be happy at all. Your survival capabilities are being destroyed when you don't mind governmental interference in every facet of your life, including stopping you in the street and patting you down if need be, or watch with cameras wherever you go. So they had to just destroy the bits in your brain, basically. They discussed it too. That makes you. They call it the ghost in the machine. And they knew exactly what parts of the brain they'd have to take out, lobotomize, in other words, to make a happy, compliance, unaggressive population who'd be easily managed. And that was old stuff back in the 50s and 60s. In fact, they knew how to piggyback certain chemicals or viruses right into those particular areas. It works very good with babies' vaccines, by the way. And all medical doctors are trained that to tell the mums they'll have a little bit of a fever. Of course, the fever is in their head. Don't worry about it too much. Well, when you get a fever in your head, that means there's inflammation. Inflammation causes death of cells. And, well, according to their reasoning at the top, they are doing a good job. They're making more compliant citizens who won't make much of a fuss going through life. And I'm quite serious about this, quite serious. The doctors don't know. They only believe what they're told as well. And as I say, you have to compare it to the writings of people like Arthur Kessler, who worked at the United Nations for a while in between jobs at MI5 for Britain. And he talks about having the necessity of lobotomizing people for world peace, and how at the United Nations they were doing many experiments. It was a joint venture with Russia, the US, and other countries, Britain and so on, to find the best ways to do this. And personally, I look around me and I really think it has been done. They did, mind you, say they wouldn't have to necessarily inoculate. They could do that, or they could put it in your water, or they could put it in your food itself, and target specific parts of the brain. And I truly think that has happened. And it comes out more and more when you read other guys who are involved in these various experiments. Now, Aldous Huxley himself only became animated and excited when he talked about Tavistock and the experiments they were doing there in the 40s and 50s. And he became excited when they talked about the brains of the different patients that they could experiment on and stick wires in them and get them to sit down and stand up and turn around and stuff like that. But then you find they were already doing it remotely in other areas too. And everyone out there, I'm sure, has heard about Dr. Jose M.R. Delgado. Well, Delgado worked for the FBI, CIA, the NSA, and all the other alphabet soup agencies, and big academia, of course, with massive grants into the area of neuroscience and neuropsychiatry. He's a guy who's known for the famous little clip you'll see up on YouTube where a bull charges him and he stands there with his little remote control device and switches it on, and the bull stops dead in its tracks. Well, he thought that was wonderful if we could do that with people too. But here's what he said. He says, we need a program of psychosurgery for political control of our society. Now, you got to understand, when these people are speaking, they're not coming out with their own particular ideas or giving a wish list if it was a different world and I was in charge. No, these guys were in world meetings to find world peace by lobotomizing the brain. So when you read this kind of stuff, take it for real. Most folk cannot accept that these things are real. They cannot accept. Even if you show them the evidence, even if you could get the characters right in front of their faces, they'd still refuse to believe they really mean what they say. Those people are gone, folks. So he says we need a program of psychosurgery for political control of our society. The purpose of physical control of the mind. Everyone who deviates from the given norm can be surgically mutilated. The individual may think that the most important reality is his own existence, but this is only his personal point of view. Man does not have the right to develop his own mind. We must electronically control the brain. Someday, armies and generals will be controlled by electronic stimulation of the brain. And that's when he was director of neuropsychiatry at Yale University Medical School. And that's Congressional Record number 26, volume 118, February 24, 1974. And he worked with the Huxleys, and both the Huxleys in fact. And he also worked with the Russells, and they all knew each other because they sat in on big meetings that were highly sponsored by the big foundations in league with their own governments to promote this. Incredible funding they had too, and they still have today, the ones who have come on since then. Incredible funding. And of course, Brzezinski loved that kind of stuff, and he touched on it in his own book, Between Two Ages, and the chapter on technotronics. They've gone even further where they can actually, without implanting your brain, they can actually send waves over a whole continent, as Brzezinski said, and make folk either placid, unhappy, suicidal, whatever, depends on the particular frequency that they wanted to use. I'll be back with more after this break. I'm Alan Watt, and we're cutting through the matrix, just touching on one of these perverted psychopaths that run the world on behalf of their masters. They're given unlimited financing to find ways of controlling every single person out there. And you've got to understand, too, for those who are awake and who have been relatively unscathed by the attacks being put upon them, by the food and the inoculations and all the rest of it, look around you, you can see it, you know it. I get enough emails here of people who are scared when they look around them in towns and cities and see how they behave or they act, or they see the sluggishness of their minds and how there's so much sameness within them. The sameness, you see. They're almost interchangeable. Their topics will always be the same, regardless of who you pick to talk about certain subjects that are in the media about. And they'll give you the answers they got by the guys who debate the stuff on the media. They are almost robotic themselves. There's no doubt about it. It's happening. And people sometimes come down on me and they'll say, "Oh, you're a downer, Alan. You know, why don't you just lighten up?" Well, you understand, when you're under full attack, if you're playing the happy jack, then there's something wrong with your brain. That old song, "Don't worry, be happy," was meant for the general public. It ties in with Charles Galton Darwin again, who said, we, those who steer the world, the captains of planet Earth, he said, we must retain our survival capabilities. but by means of lobotomy, chemical and otherwise, he said, the public won't need that. They won't need the survival capabilities because the state will be making all their decisions for them. And he was a physicist who worked on the Manhattan Project. So it's not a matter of being sullen or, oh, woe is me type of thing. It's a matter of understanding the full dangers you're under. As I say, you've got to know all the bad news, and you've got to understand the bad news to understand what you're up against. You know, there's not one single military in the world, hopefully, in this day and age, that goes up against an enemy without finding everything they can about that enemy. And they've got to know what are the decoys that the enemy puts out and what's real and what isn't real. And it promises you personal power and all of this kind of stuff. And that's how they hope to get through stuff which they don't understand, this big new world order and its rapidity of changing. But they hope to personally come through it somehow. And what it teaches them is how to deny all the negatives and not even look at the negatives. Now, many people are so astonished when they start to wake up. They look into a spiritual means to escape it. In fact, they go spiritual shopping, like religious shopping. And most folk pick something in the New Age because they feel that the old religions don't guarantee them enough security. And so the New Age is something where there's no real rules and teach them just to be happy. Now, Huxley would have been awfully happy with that himself because he said that the main reason that people should be conditioned by those who knew how to do it is simply to put them into a state of happiness. Because most people were always unhappy. He didn't mention the reason that they're always unhappy is because we're always going through either wars or economic depressions and so on, or unemployment or whatever, because the big boys club of which he was a member made all those things happen. So naturally you're pretty unhappy. So the whole key is to make you simply happy. And if you're happy regardless of what's happening, you're basically a conditioned fool. Because a natural creature would not be happy if its environment was threatened. I'm talking about its personal home, for instance, or the land that it walks on, or even its own personal security. It would not be happy at all. Your survival capabilities are being destroyed when you don't mind governmental interference in every